Tonight is the first night of Passover. The Jewish Federation of New Mexico is currently looking at the needs of the Jewish community throughout the state. Last fall, the organization conducted a survey of Jewish residents and made some surprising discoveries. Our producer, Sarah Gustavus, sat down with Sarah Koplik to talk about how the Jewish Federation of New Mexico is using those survey results.
Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why do a survey of the Jewish community in New Mexico?
Well, we didn't even know how many Jews lived in New Mexico. We didn't know anything about their characteristics. All of our ideas about the Jewish people of New Mexico were guesses. We thought there were 12,000 Jews in the state. I personally thought that we had a 90% intermarriage rate among the youngest members of our community, and both of those ideas were completely false.
Because it can be based on just people that you know, that in your own family or your own friend circle.
Right, exactly, and not a more scientific look at what the demographic characteristics of our population. Now we have a far better sense of what we look like, and that's really exciting.
What are some of the key findings from this survey that help you better understand the community today?
Well, now we have an idea, we have a population estimate, which is based on a Brandeis University work, which is 24,000 Jews in our state, double what I thought. We have an intermarriage rate, which is only about 40%, much lower, much lower than what we thought. We know that our population is significantly older than New Mexico as a whole. Our median age is 55, 20 years older than the median age of New Mexico as a whole. Half of the Jewish community is over age 55, and another third is over age 65.
And one of the things that surprised me about the findings was that so many people had moved here from out of state. When people are coming here, what does that change about the sense of community? Are people seeking out Jewish families, Jewish organizations? What does that mean when you get that sense of people coming here from other places?
Exactly. So there's only 13% of Jews were born in New Mexico. And then the other 87% came from elsewhere. But a large number of those, a high percentage, have been here for decades. A third of Jews in New Mexico have been here for over 20 years, and another 20% have been here for at least 10 years. So what we see is that when people come to New Mexico, they stay, and then they're very invested in the community. But we lose people in their 20s and 30s, as New Mexico does as a whole, because there aren't as many job opportunities for young people. And we see that to even greater extent among the Jewish community.
What about talking to local politicians or local leaders about saying this is our community, maybe here in Albuquerque as an example? What does having these numbers mean for future conversations with those officials?
Well, I think it's about conversations with for officials and leaders in the larger community, but the Jewish Federation of New Mexico is also using the information for itself to help our entire community understand itself better so that we can plan for our future, so that we're looking at a large number of older citizens and what can we do, what kind of services need to be provided, what can we do to make things easier as people age. Do we need to have more transportation or services to help elderly stay in their home? What do we need to do as a community to help our population on the one side? And on the other side is we have so few children. How do we have more young people stay in New Mexico? And that's also a real issue.
What are some of the other findings that are very meaningful for the Jewish community but may not be the significance may not be obvious to people outside of the community?
For us, one of our hot topic issues is affiliation rate. And our survey found about 60% of Jews in New Mexico are affiliated, which means they belong to a synagogue. And this is contentious because if there were 24,000 Jews, that would mean that 15,000 were in a synagogue, and that doesn't quite add up. Instead, what we say is those who took the survey are the ones who are most attached to the community already, who are already members of Jewish organizations. Those were the easiest ones to find. Amazingly enough, we believe that 7% of the Jewish community of New Mexico took the survey, which is really astonishing. And 98.4% started the survey online and continued it to the end. When we had phone interviews, people didn't hang up. They kept talking. They wanted to share their experience. And we're incredibly grateful to all of the people who said, I want my voice to count. Almost 1,700 people said, we want our voice to count and we want to participate. And so that's very exciting for us. Another really interesting issue for us is children. We have a very low birth rate. Only a quarter of Jewish households have children under 18 in them. And only about 60% of those children receive a Judaic education. Again, that's a very interesting issue for us. And another issue which we find fascinating as a community is rates of conversion among spouses. So Jewish men and Jewish women both are equally likely to marry a Jewish partner, a partner who's born Jewish, 46%. But men are over 2 times as more likely to have a partner who converts to Judaism versus women. And we believe that that's a really strong cultural difference because of Jewish tradition's emphasis on matrilineal descent. So it really matters if your mother's Jewish in a traditional context. That's not true for progressive Judaism. Either parent is fine. But certainly among the Orthodox, among conservative Jewry, traditionally, the mother's religion is the most important.
What did you find when you asked people about their education?
Our education levels were astonishing, honestly. We found 59% of Jews in New Mexico have a graduate degree. That's almost double the national average for Jews, which is 35% of Jews nationally have a graduate degree. We're not quite sure what to make of that number. Perhaps it has to do with people coming into New Mexico to work, either for the national laboratories or for the university, or very specific reasons that people are brought into the state to work. But again, that really needs more research because we're not sure about what that means. But for me personally, that was just extraordinary finding.
Well, thank you so much for sharing a few details with us today.
Thank you so much.